The Get On Living Safely campaign is sponsoring this podcast to remind you to keep your spending in the community. Supporting local businesses keeps food on the table for our friends and neighbors. Follow them on social media and learn more at getonlivingsafely.com. Today, we chat about writing and poetry with Peter Engen. We discuss the creative process, the origins of his new book, his involvement in the local music scene, and he shares a poem with us from Flower House and Farrell's Son. You can find more conversations on our website, lacrosselocal.com. I'm Amy.
And I'm Brent.
And this is Lacrosse Local.
Well, my name is Peter Engen, and I was born in Caledonia, Minnesota. Yeah, back when they had a little hospital. I guess I was born in the clinic there. I think when I first started to understand what writing was all about, I was first turned on to it by watching my grandma, who was the secretary of the family business, kind of like the bookkeeper, and she answered phones. And, I come from a construction background. And so from a very early age, I would go to work with my dad, and we would start the mornings and end the day at the home office of my grandma and grandpa. And she, at that time, and this is I'll date myself here, but in the mid 70s, she did a lot of work on typewriters, on a typewriter. And I think she had an electronic one at that time, but she always had the old machine around. And so I think first I was just intrigued by the mechanics of it and when working this machine and the sort of idea of pressing this key and it would put a letter on the paper. There was kind of I guess a craft to it at first. And when I'm asked this question, I do go back to that place in time. And I think in the beginning, what I would do, and I can remember this, I would read, those kind of like little golden books, the 70s children's books that are nothing like they are now. Clifford the Big Red Dog. I would copy the text, I would read it, and then I would type it on, so I would sit there and do that, which is, I don't know, looking back on that, I guess that's kind of I don't know. I wanted this idea of permanence, and it leads all the way up into me, doing this book. But this idea of being able to think about something and then put it on paper, and then other people can see that. So there's that wanting to be understood, that wanting to express what's in your mind that I think most artists struggle with. I think definitely in high school, I dabbled a little bit in creative writing as a form of expression and wanting to be understood. And then it really took off in college when I began writing and just starting to submit to this magazine. And partly, it was a big part of it is expressing yourself and trying to understand yourself. The other part of it is actually getting it out there and reading your thoughts in a book. It's like a very intense form of like you were to look at a book of pictures from when you were young, and that takes you to a visual place. But I read some of the journals I was published in college, and it takes you to this sort of intimate, emotional picture book. So I've always been driven by both sides of that, creating something, getting it out, but also the permanence of it being in a book, and having that on the shelf.
And I'm sure your process has changed when writing from your youth. Just experiencing your writing now, you post a lot on Facebook and you kind of reference memory a lot, time gone by. I think one about you sitting on the beach with another person and kind of rehashing that now. And I'm sure when you're younger, you're writing about experiences of the future. What is your process like when writing? Is it kind of a sit down and do it, or is it just kind of thoughts that strike you at the moment, or completely something else?
I think now, because there is a bit of busyness to life with being a dad and having children and a business and just that sort of the responsible adulting thing, I don't have that headspace so much to just kind of sit and wait for it to come. What works for me now, if I can use the word works for me, something might come. I call it that voice, that kind of voice I hear in my head is there. And I suppose the goal is to kind of live a life where that voice is always there. I have to be patient now. And when a lot of the distractions go away, I may hear something. And when I say hear something, I might hear just a few words, or I might see some sort of a visual scene that, like, this little alarm goes off and it's like, there's a poem in there. And it might just be a thought. It might be, seeing a cow in a field dying or something. And I don't want to be morbid, but something that just goes, oh, something's up there. There was a while ago where I was watching people set up for a wedding, and I was watching the wedding and different characters at play in this wedding, and it was at a barn. It just came flooding in, like, oh my gosh, the nervousness of the father and all the tension built into that. And I felt like, okay, there's something here, and it of course triggers my own memories of my own things and that. So, and then I might sit and ruminate on it for days or weeks even. And I keep a little notepad in my truck. And if something comes, sometimes it'll just be a little clever line that will make sense. And I'll be like, I'll put that line down and then just kind of let it percolate for a while, and then some of the best stuff that's come out that I think is good is after I wait for a while and I'm percolating on it, and then I start to put it down and it comes out fairly clean and fairly in full form. And then all I have to do is just that I carve away at it for maybe another week or so. And I am somewhat of a, like a savant sort of a thing when I edit. It's just like, once I'm on something, I'll be doing it for a week straight and just chipping away. Might be a syllable here or a word here or how I do the stanza breaks. And that's a big part of what I do too. I'm always searching for the clean line. And I think this is a really important part of writing is I'm always thinking of how it sounds being read. And then I'm always thinking of the audience reading it, because at the end of the day, I want to be understood. And I don't want there to be this sort of like, group of intellectuals. What did he mean here? What was this? What can we pull out of this? That's not what I'm writing about. I want it to, they see it, it's either going to knock them on the ground or they're not going to like it. I want people who wouldn't maybe normally read poetry, maybe are just turned off by the whole perceived scene of it and the whole academic world that surrounds literature, I guess. It doesn't have to be like that. I just want to write about everyday things in a somewhat of a poetic way.
You talk about the kind of the physicality, actually pressing the typewriter, working on that. I know you do seem to work a lot out on Facebook, and you seem to be prolific on social media with putting your content there. How did the new book, and it's called Flower House and the Feral Sun, kind of come about? It is that physical piece, but you're also very active on social media with sharing your work. How's that kind of medium? I mean, how did it transpire to do that?
I think people that write and want to be read and are comfortable with getting their thoughts out there, that's a big step. Have your own piece of work out there, and like I call it, on the shelf. So, over the last, however many years, I've been writing for a long time, but I've taken large breaks when I've moved to different parts of the country. And kind of in the middle of my life here, I've started to submit poems to literary journals and different competitions or whatever. And, it took me a long time to kind of work up the courage to do that. That could be analyzed ad infinitum, but I started to do that, and it has treated me very well. I try to remain as humble as possible about that, but I'm doing well as far as getting things published in magazines and literary journals that I send things to at a pretty high percentage. And that made me think, well, maybe it's time. Maybe it's time to put something out that's fairly serious and has some merit to it. And that led me to put together this small collection. It's definitely larger than a chapbook, but it's not. I'm putting one toe in the water here. It's a big toe, but it's to kind of see what's going on, because we live in a digital world, and I'm kind of a Luddite, and I do put some stuff on Facebook. I work on a 1954 Royal typewriter. It's kind of like, imagine a car from the 50s. That's what I type on. So it's been a long time coming, and it's also, when you're in middle age, you do start thinking about legacy. That's kind of a big word, legacy, but you want to leave something. Some people scrapbook, some people take pictures. I'd be lying if I said after I'm gone, I would like maybe my grandkids, or here's how your grandpa thought, back then. This is the type of person that he was. And you can tell a lot from pictures, but you can really tell a lot from writing.
Can you read one from the new book?
So yeah, this is Flower, House, and Feral Sun. This one's called Edges. Am I enough to carry our monsters from the pillow to the burn pile, where there's a stump that was used to butcher chickens, but we don't do that anymore because you started cutting yourself below the knee with a thin blade from a broken pencil sharpener, and it looked like a rake of slow paper cuts when you lifted your pant leg at the clinic. The doctor spoke like a metronome about gathering things with sharp edges into a safe place. It felt like a screaming tea kettle left too long on the stove, and I kept asking the invisible if I am strong enough to be the skin of the bear you need me to be. Am I thick enough to hold it all together and wrap myself fully around our fears as the long gray face of winter pushes against the windows, when you know that I know that we know why there's a pause between saying, I love you, sweetheart, and good night now, leaving our bedroom doors open just a bit to let a handful of light from the hallway plunge into our shadows, connecting my bed to yours.
Well, thank you, sir. You've also been involved quite a bit in the music scene for some time. Does that also affect your writing in some ways, or do you use it as a tool?
Yeah, a lot of my heroes are musicians. I'm oftentimes kind of in awe of where a good musician can take me, because I do live most of my life in my head. I'm a pretty extreme introvert, Working with local and regional musicians has been a godsend for me, because it keeps me connected to that part of myself, and in some ways has been just a life preserver, thrown into the ocean of parenthood and real life responsibilities, and it's allowed me to keep one foot in that arena. And a lot of the people that I've worked with or around have been of a genre that's fairly grounded, and also trying to explain some of the deeper parts of ourselves. And that always resonates with me fairly clearly. And I think it's taken me a while to understand that I am a part of that community. And I think that's something that artists struggle with a lot, is this, well, self-acceptance for one thing, but then acceptance into this greater community that, I matter. What I'm saying, what I'm thinking, what I'm doing does matter. I might not be, building a house, but I might be building a song or entertaining in that way. I'm in that community of people that want to share and want to be understood, and need to share and need to be understood. It wasn't too long ago in our human evolution where, the kings and queens used to ask the poets, they used to ask them, well, hey, what do you think about things? Now we have a little different society going on. You don't do this for money. I'll put it that way. It's not a capitalist endeavor.
Some of the reasons that we started this podcast, Lacrosse Local, is because wanting to have these discussions with these musicians, with these artists, with these poets, which I find to be important. A lot of publications in the past around this area haven't shown a light to all the different individuals that maybe are just coming out with that first album, who are maybe just coming out with that first book. They're always going after the same 5 people. It's really been enjoyable to talk to 100+ people that are from this area, that are, hyper original in their creativity. It's really unique to see. You've been a part of that as well. So, I'm sure you're having a great time with COVID like everybody else. What's next for you? I know you just released this book, but is there anything that you're excited about that you see coming down the road?
I don't know. My kids are in virtual academy, and I would like to get this, we've kind of written off the year. I think that's probably the wise thing to do. Looking at things perhaps opening back up, going somewhere. I had to cancel a trip into Canada this summer because they won't let us in. I've prided myself my whole life on being fairly introverted and being able to spend quite a bit of time just in solitude. But, it is working on me right now. It's the little things. I would like to have a salty breakfast, I call it, at a diner. I would like to do some of those small things again, to hear some music in like a traditional way. I am missing that connection to people. So this book, I do have enough material to start putting another one together, but that's, a bit premature. We're just starting the rollout with media for this one. I will be doing kind of a reading tour when and if the science allows. There's things like that. I'm looking forward to the little things. I do think that the collective energy that's being stored or put down way down deep, I think when this thing does end, I think it's going to be we're going to make the gay 20s look pretty tame. That next festival season is going to rage, so.
No, I definitely think people are ready to get out. It has been a collaborative experience, good and bad.
We have to hold the line, though. Yeah. People are getting fatigued, but we got to do it.
So if people want to check out the book or just find out more, what's the best resource for them?
If you can go to ramshacklepress.org, there's a direct link to purchase the book. It's only $10. So, yeah, buy local. We're staying off of Amazon.
Lacrosse Local Podcast is a production of River Travel Media. Do you have an interview idea you would like to share with us? Message us on Facebook at Lacrosse Locals. Subscribe to the Lacrosse Local Podcast on your favorite podcast app. If you like us, rate us 5 stars. We thank you for it.